Water dumped over her head, her art, supplies trashed, and a mop shoved into her hands as a jeering crowd watched until her billionaire husband walked in to unveil a truth that had shattered their world. The place was a palace, marble floors gleaming under massive chandeliers, gold accents everywhere, the kind of spot where wealth didn't just whisper, it shouted. Hannah walked in after a long day teaching art to kids who had nothing but dreams, her paint-stained t-shirt clinging to her, an old baseball cap shading her tired eyes, faded jeans hugging her legs in a beat up backpack slung over one shoulder. She was beautiful, soft brown hair peeking out, warm hazel eyes, but exhaustion hit it, and the staff didn't care to look deeper. She'd been at it since dawn, showing those kids how to mix colors, how to turn blank pages into something alive. Her hands still smelled of acrylics, her knees ached from crouching beside their tiny desks, but her heart was full. All she wanted now was a bed, a shower, maybe a quiet night. She pulled out her phone, dialed Jonathan, her husband, the guy who owned this whole glittering empire. "Hey, babe," she said, voice soft but steady. "I'm wiped. Can I crash here tonight?" Chuckled, warm as always. "Already booked. You the penthouse, Hannah. Just tell him your name." She smiled, grateful, and headed to the front desk, figuring it'd be quick, but the second she stepped up, the air shifted. Two staffers, Colin, all slick hair and tight suit, and Sophie, blonde with a fake smile, looked her up and down like she'd tracked mud into their perfect world. Colin's eyes narrowed at her paint stains. Sophie's lips twitched at her cap. "Can I help you?" Colin asked, his tone dripping with doubt. Hannah adjusted her backpack, calm as ever. "Hi, I'm Hannah Brooks. My husband, Jonathan Carter, made a reservation for me." She waited, expecting a nod, a key, something normal. Instead, Sophie smirked, tapping her screen like it was a joke. "No Brooks here and no Carter either. You sure you've got the right place?" Hannah blinked, keeping her cool. "Yeah, I'm sure. Could you check again?" Colin leaned over, glancing at Sophie's screen, then back at Hannah's jeans. "Look, lady, this is Carter Royale. Maybe try the motel down the street. More your speed." Colin didn't just sneer. He grabbed a stack of glossy Carter Royale brochures from the desk and flung them at Hannah's chest, the sharp edges smacking her paint-stained shirt as he barked, "Take these and read up on real guests somewhere else." Sophie cackled. "Yeah. Learn what class looks like while AI couple in designer coats snickered from the sidelines, the papers scattered around her feet, some sticking to the wet spots from her earlier splashing. But Hannah didn't snap, just bent to pick them up, her hands steady their cruelty, a spotlight she refused to shrink from. Sophie chimed in, "We don't have time for games if you're pretending to be Mrs. Carter." At least dressed the part. Hannah's cheeks flushed, but she didn't snap, just stood there, steady. "I'm not pretending. Could you call manager?" Sophie took it up a notch, snatching a glass of ice water from a passing waiter and dumping it over Hannah's head, the cubes clattering to the marble floor as the lobby gasped. "There, now you're awake. Get out of here." She sneered, her blonde hair bouncing as Colin hooted, "Perfect wet trash fits her." A woman in a fur coat giggled, "She's a walking puddle while I..." "Shanty, businessman snapped a photo, muttering, "This'll be good for laughs." Hannah stood there, soaked in shivering water, dripping from her cap, but she didn't yell, just wiped her face, her calm a stark contrast to their venom. Colin snorted, "For you? Nah, you don't belong here." It got worse. Sophie waved over a security guard, Tom, big guy buzzcut, hands like ham. "She's causing a disturbance," Sophie said loud enough for the lobby to hear. Guests in suits and gowns turned staring, claim she's Jonathan Carter's wife, Colin added, smirking, "But no record, probably a scam." Tom loomed over Hannah, his shadow swallowing her. "Let's go, miss. Out nature." Hannah held her ground, voice even. "I just need to speak to someone in charge." Tom didn't just loom. Grabbed Hannah's backpack from the floor, where Sophie had tossed it, ripping it open and dumping her art supplies. Brushes, paints, a sketchbook across the lobby, the colors smearing as he growled. "Let's see what you're really hiding." Colin smirked, but it's stolen. Look at her rags. While Sophie kicked a paint tube under a sofa. "What a mess fits her." Guests laughed, one shouting, "She's a scavenger." Hannah knelt to gather her things, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't argue, just picked up her life. As their jeers echoed, a knife twisting deeper. Tom shook his head. "You're leaving now." The crowd murmured, some amused, some annoyed, watching her like she was a sideshow. Then it turned physical. Colin grabbed a water pitcher from the desk, splashing it across Hannah's chest, the cold soaking her shirt, paint smudging into streaks. "Cool off and get lost," he barked, laughing as guests gasped. Sophie snatched Hannah's backpack, tossing it toward the door, pencils and brushes spilling out. "Take your trash with you," she sneered. Tom stepped in, gripping Hannah's arm, dragging her toward the exit, his fingers digging in. "Move it, no freeloaders here." The lobby buzzed, people whispering, "Who does she think she is?" Colin stepped closer as Tom dragged her, snagging her baseball cap and tossing it into a trash bin by the desk, yelling, "You won't need this where you're going. Street's your level," Sophie clapped. "Finally clean her out." While a man in a tux hooted, "Good riddance!" The crowd's laughter swelled a wave of scorn, and Hannah's wet hair fell into her face, paint and water mixing on her shirt, but she didn't flinch, just kept her footing. Her silence a defiance they couldn't break. Hannah didn't fight, didn't yell, just let them pull her. Her cap slipping, her dignity a quiet shield. Sophie didn't stop. She grabbed a mop from a nearby janitor cart and thrust it into Hannah's hands as Tom pulled her toward the door, shrieking, "Clean your mess before you go, you filthy nobody." Colin didn't let up. He snatched a pen from the desk and scribbled "Get out" in bold black ink across Hannah's soaked shirt, the marker squeaking as he laughed signage for the trash heap. Sophie doubled over. "Oh, that's art her kind," while a guest in a velvet blazer clapped. "Frame it, she's a walking exhibit." The ink bled into the paint, stains a permanent mark of their scorn, and Hannah's chest tightened, water still, dripping from her hair, but she didn't flinch, just stood there. Her hazel eyes steady their vicious glee of fire she refused to let consume her. Colin smirked. "Yeah, earn your keep for once, while Itali." "Dantizza." Woman in pearls tossed a coin at her. "Feet, here's your tip." The lobby roared a tidal wave of mockery, and Hannah gripped, the mop water pooling around her, her supplies scattered, but she didn't snap. Just stood there, paint-stained, and steady there a storm she weathered. Without a word, the lobby's hum turned, jagged as Tom tightened his grip, dragging Hannah closer to the glass doors, her sneakers squeaking on the wet marble while Sophie twirled the mop like a victory flag, chanting, "Out, out, out." Guests pressed forward, phones out, filming her stumble, their whispers a rising tide. "She's done for kicker already." Colin leaned into the desk mic, his voice booming, "Attention, please." Trash removal in progress. The air thickened, every eye locked on her, the exit looming, and Hannah's heart pounded, her supplies crunching underfoot, but she didn't beg, just braced herself. The storm about to break. That's when Jonathan Carter walked in. He'd just landed from a Tokyo deal, still in his charcoal suit. Tall and broad dark hair, neat hazel eyes, sharp. He froze mid-step. Jet lag forgotten. Seeing his wife, his Hannah dragged across his own hotel, water dripping from her shirt, her bag scattered. The lobby went dead silent. Colin's smirk faded. Sophie's hand froze mid-gesture. Tom's grip loosened. Jonathan didn't raise his voice, didn't storm over. He just walked up, calm as stone, slid his arm around Hannah's shoulders and said, "She's my wife." The air sucked out of the room. Guests gaped, mouths open. Colin stammered. Sir," Sophie blinked. "Mr. Carter." Tom stepped back, hands falling limp. Jonathan Carter wasn't just some rich guy. He was the self-made billionaire who'd built the Carter chain from nothing, started as a server at 16, cleaned toilets at 18, saved every dime till he bought his first rundown motel and turned it into gold. Now he owned 50 hotels worldwide. Ikai. Name every staffer knew, but Hannah, they'd never seen her face, never guessed. The woman in paint stains was the one who'd stood by him from the start. He looked at her gentle. "You okay?" She nodded, brushing wet hair from her face. No tears, no fuss. "Yeah, just tired." He turned to the trio, eyes narrowing but voice low. "Follow me." They trailed him, heads down, as he led Hannah to the private elevator, the penthouse office, his sanctuary. Glass walls, city lights sprawling below. Colin, Sophie, and Tom shuffled in pale while Hannah sat still, soaked, her cap on the desk. Jonathan stood, hands in pockets, and started talking. "I grew up with nothing," he said, voice steady. "No shoes, some winter's dinner from a can if I was lucky. Worked every job this industry's got. Server, janitor, night clerk. Built this place every brick because I believed in something better." And Hannah, he glanced at her pride flickering. She was there. "When I had $10 to my name, she's why I made it." Colin shifted. Sophie stared at the floor. Tom swallowed hard. "You judged her by her clothes." Jonathan went on. "It pushed her out of a hotel I built for people like her, people who work hard, who don't flash wealth. That's not what Carter Royale stands for." Hannah spoke, then quiet but firm, paint still on her fingers. "I wasn't angry today. I was sad. Sad that you saw me and decided I'm less. Without even asking who I am. That happens to too many people every day." She didn't demand, heads roll, didn't point. Fingers just let her words sit heavy. Colin mumbled, "We didn't know, Jonathan." Cut him off. "You didn't care to know. That's the problem. Here's the twist. Nobody saw coming. Hannah wasn't just his wife. She was the heartbeat of the Carter Foundation's art program, a lifeline for homeless kids across the city. She'd started it years back, teaching in shelters, funding it with their fortune. Millions that kept Carter Royale's lights on too. Cullen and Sophie's paychecks tied to her work, Tom's uniform. Paid by her vision, they'd mocked the woman who'd indirectly built their world. And now they sat there stunned as Jonathan laid it out. "She's not just my partner," he said. She's the reason we give back. The room's silence shattered as Jonathan's arm tightened around Hannah, his voice low but piercing. She's the soul of this place, every dollar. You've earned every light you've switched on comes from her heart. Collins' knees buckled the water he'd splashed. Now a noose, he'd mocked the woman whose art funded his life. His slick hair, a crown of shame, Sophie's blonde bravado melted her, mop twirling a bitter memory she taunted. The founder who'd shaped their world, her smirk, a ghost. Tom's ham hands trembled. The supplies he'd trashed, her lifeline. He'd pushed a queen and the crowd's gasps turned to cheers, their downfall. Symphony Hannah's quiet strength conducted another curveball hit Jonathan. Didn't fire them, didn't even dock their pay. He leaned forward, voice like steel. You're staying, but you're fixing this. Bias training every staffer top 2. Bottom empathy classes, you'll learn what it's like to be on the other side, and Hannah's art program, you're in hands-on. Starting tomorrow, you'll lead the change. Here or you're out. Colin's slick hair fell limp as Jonathan's words sank in his smugness. At Ghost, he'd splashed water on a woman whose foundation paid his wage, and now he'd lead her reform or lose everything. His arrogance a chain he'd forged. Sophie's blonde bounce flattened her. Transfer dream a lifeline she'd have to earn. She'd mock the woman who'd built the art program she'd begged to join her. Career dangling by Hannah's grace. Tom's buzzcut couldn't hide his sweat. He'd drag the wife of the man who'd signed his checks, and now he'd train others. Under her shadow, his pushy hands, a memory that had haunted him, their world, flipped and the audience cheered as their own cruelty buried them. Hannah's quiet strength, the gavel on their fate. Colin's jaw tightened. Sophie's eyes widened, nodded slow. They weren't off. The hook they were on, a leash one. They'd have to earn their way off 3 months. Later, Carter Royale wasn't the same. Colin, once all sneers and suits, stood at the desk greeting an old woman in a frayed coat like she owned the place. Welcome, ma'am, he said, handing her a key. His voice soft, genuine. He'd spent weeks in Hannah's classes watching kids paint their fears into hope, and it had stuck Sophie after sketching with a shy girl who'd lost everything put in for a transfer community outreach. Her new dream, she'd found something in those classrooms, something bigger than a paycheck. Tom, the guy who dragged Hannah, now ran security training across every Carter hotel. His rule simple: safety, yes, dignity always. He'd apologized to her. Face red, voice low, and she'd just nodded. No grudge, the lobby hummed different now. Warmer real guests, noticed staff smiled. More the air less stiff. Hannah walked in. One evening, same paint-stained shirt, same cap, and nobody blinked. Colin waved. Good to see you, Mrs. Carter. Sophie rushed over. Need anything? Tom tipped his hat. Evening, ma'am. She smiled, small and true, heading up to Jonathan's office. He met her there, pulling her close, the city glowing. Outside, they're better, he said. She nodded. They're learning the hotel she'd been thrown from was hers again, not by force, but by change. One quiet moment defined it. Hannah stood by the lobby fountain watching a kid from her class, a scrappy boy named Leo, check in with his mom. Free night courtesy of the program. Colin carried their bags. Sophie slipped Leo a candy. Tom held the door. Hannah's eyes softened, paint still on her hands. Knowing this was bigger than her, humiliation. It was about them, all of them seeing what she'd always seen worth. Isn't in the clothes. If this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for